We've all had those moments where someone totally misunderstood us. They'll tell us that they know exactly what we really meant, or slapping a label about our character, telling us something like they know exactly what kind of person we really are. And they're way off. And before you know it, you can feel the heat rising in your chest, your jaw tightens up, and you are already compiling all the reasons why they are wrong, how unfair they are, how baseless they are, and that they are the real issue here. And you do all this in a split second. Here's the funny part. When someone points out a mistake you actually made and you know that as a fact too, you can usually keep it together. But if someone has an incorrect view of you, that's when you totally lose it. So why being misunderstood stings so much more than just being wrong? It's a very particular thing, isn't it? But it's not random. There's a good reason why your body reacts to being misunderstood like it's a full-blown crisis, like it's a threat of your survival. And this is why it can trigger you. Because at the moment, you're in full self-defense mode, and there's nothing more important than making sure the other person sees that they are the one at fault here, that they have it all wrong, that they have misjudged you. And if this sounds like you, this episode is for you. Welcome to Self-Full, the show where we dive deep into the trigger in our head that we don't even know why they're there. My name is Wilson. I'm not a therapist or some kind of monk on the mountaintop. I'm just a regular guy who spends years snapping back at everyone who got me wrong and eventually figured out that all that anger was really trying to protect something deeper. So today we're focusing on feeling misunderstood, that instant flash of anger when someone totally misjudged you. We'll explore why it hits so hard, why it feels completely justified to fire back in a moment, and 3 simple moves to shift you from shouting, "How dare you?" to getting what you actually need, being understood. So stick around, because this one just might save you from feeling misunderstood in the future. I believe that most of the time we're reasonable people. I mean, most days we just let things slide. When someone is a little rude, you can brush it off. When the traffic jam is annoying, or the Wi-Fi is a little bit too slow, or you got a weird comment on your Instagram post, you can manage it, usually. But then, when someone misread you, they say something like, "Oh, so you don't care," or "Oh, you're just in it for the attention," or "You always forget because this is just the kind of person you are." And they say it like it's 100% true, like they've read the file on you and already made up their mind. And just like that, you go from calm to furious in a blink of an eye. Maybe you snap back. Maybe you go silent and let that frustration spill over later. Maybe you say something you can't take back. And then the worst part, you replayed it in your head for the rest of the day, or even for days, over and over and over again, thinking of a better response or imagine how the situation could have played out differently for an argument that's already been done and dusted. Notice how this can happen with just about anyone. You could be snapping at people you barely know, like firing back at a comment from some random online stranger. But it hits hardest with those who should know you best. Your closest friend, your parent, your partner. Somehow, being misread by them stings even more. In fact, this kind of situation hurts so much that the rift created by being misunderstood between you and the people that are supposed to be close to you could last for a long time. Not just for a few days, but could be for a month, for a few years, for a few decades even. If you're listening and thinking, "Yep, that's totally me and I hate it," good. You're exactly who this is for. But know this, that rage you have when being misjudged isn't a flaw in your character. It doesn't mean you have a short temper. It's a signal pointing at something important, even if it's not hitting the mark quite right. And so by the end of this, you'll understand what it is protecting and how to deal with it before it takes control of you. So let's dive into the big question. Why does this hit so much harder than it should? And this is point 1. You're not really angry about what they said. You're angry about what you think they said. So here's the thing. When someone misinterprets you, there's this tiny little gap, so small you probably don't even notice it, between what they actually said and you getting mad. And in between that tiny gap is where your brain throws in a translation of what their word says about you. Like if someone says, "You don't seem like you care," that's just 6 words. But in a split second, your brain blows that up into, "They misjudged me for not caring. They think I'm selfish. They think I'm a bad person. They think I'm heartless." And that's what you're really angry about. Not the 6 words, but the whole translation your brain just patched onto those 6 words. But let's pause for a second. They said 6 words, and you turned that into a whole story, then got mad at the other person because of your own story. I'm not saying that you can never be reasonable, just that our brain takes facts and judgment very differently. If it's a comment about something you did, like say you and your partner are discussing about monthly expenses, and they said, oh, it looks like you spent more this month than the previous month. That comment you can handle, and you're probably already thinking about how to manage it better for the next month. But if it's a judgment about who you are, say if they follow up with another comment like, you should be more mindful on your spendings, your brain takes that and translates it into, this person think I don't know how to handle money. This person think I believe money grows on trees. And from that split second, you're firing back at them because you are defending your own character. So why do we have that kind of reflex? Because back in the day, and I mean way back in the caveman era, being seen the wrong way by your group was a serious issue. If your tribe turns on you, you could get kicked out. And it is extremely difficult to survive alone in a prehistoric era. I mean, try to fend off a saber-toothed tiger by yourself. I mean, this is life or death. So to the human brain, being misunderstood is a biological threat. Until this day, your brain still protects how you're viewed by others like it's a life or death situation. And it has to identify if this threat exists in a split second. That's why the translation in your head comes out so fast. And your threat response, which most of the time is anger and rage, because rage is what triggers your self-defense mechanism, kicks in instantly before you can even think it through properly. The priority at the moment is self-defense of your character, either by explaining yourself, pulling out examples and proof that you are not what they say you are, or questioning their characters so that you can show that they're not all that high and mighty, that they're also just human and they do make mistakes. And then the other person sees your defense mechanism as an attack on their character and also fires back. And at this point, neither of you are reasoning, but are engaged in a rage cycle that feeds on each other. So how do we get out of that vicious cycle? And here's your first tool, a split, a simple split. Catch the story, the translation that you had in your head, and separate it from the actual words. When you feel that rage building up, catch it, pause, and do your best to finish these 2 sentences. The first is, what they actually said was blank. The second is, what I'm making it mean is blank. Say them out loud if you need to, or just think them in your head if you're in a public space. That's the entire trick. You're pulling apart the fact from the story you added on. And why does this work? Well, the words they use are set in stone. You can't change that, but the meaning you tagged on, that's all you. Once you recognize your version is just that, a guess, it might be an educated guess, but it's still a guess, not a fact. You can finally start to question it. You can't argue with a blurred feeling, but you can argue with a clear sentence. Before that, you're labeling your story, your translation as the truth, but now you can label the story and turns it from the truth into just one possible way that you're seeing it. I'll give you an example on what that looked like in a normal moment. Imagine you're texting a close friend and you're only half paying attention, and then you saw this reply, and the reply reads, honestly, you've been kinda distant lately. And suddenly your face goes hot. You didn't read the 7 words. You read a verdict. She thinks I'm a bad friend. She thinks I'm letting her down. She thinks I don't care about her. And before you know it, your thumbs are already typing a long defensive reply. But hold up, before you hit send, pause and try to complete these 2 sentences. And the first one goes, what she actually said was, honestly, you've been kinda distant lately. Just that simple 7 words. And the second sentence you try to complete yourself is, what I'm making that 7 words mean is, she thinks I don't care about her. And when you see those 2 lines next to each other, the difference is massive. One is just 7 words on a screen, while the other one is an entire breakup story you just created in seconds. You almost launch into a battle over a message they never even sent. And honestly, I learned this lesson the hard way. Years ago, early in my career, I had a job that made me super nervous about messing up. So I kept my head down, I worked hard, but I kept quiet. Then one day, a manager pulled me aside and said, you don't seem like you want to be here today. I froze. At the moment, I heard what he said, but I didn't hear what he actually said. I heard what I thought he meant. He thinks I'm lazy. He thinks I'm incompetent. He thinks I don't belong here. So I got stiff for a second, and then I got defensive, which just made me look like I really didn't want to be there. I basically act out the comment that was made by the manager from the story I made up in my mind. And years later, when I replayed that moment, I realized I needed to split it. What did he actually said? That I seemed like I don't want to be there. And what did I make him mean? I thought he was judging me for my performance. Now, those are not the same thing. He was probably just commenting on my tired face, on my quiet behavior. And I turned it into a final judgment on my character. So here's the first takeaway. You're reacting to a story and translation in your mind, not the actual words. But it gets worse. Your brain doesn't write a neutral story. It always goes for the worst case scenario. And once you see that, it's hard to unsee it, which leads us to point 2. Your brain always writes the worst version. So here's the thing. When your brain makes a translation on what you see or hear, it usually goes for the most negative one. Like when you see your friend seems a bit annoying when talking to you, your brain quickly translates that to, oh man, he hates me now. Or let's say when you're on a date and the other person is just typing on her phone, you might translate that into, she thinks I'm boring. Even something like when you hear a person tells you that, oh, they forgot what you said. Your brain can flip that into, this person don't care about what I have to say. Your brain skips all the reasonable explanation and serves you the most damaging version as if it is the only truth out there. And why does our brain do that? Well, again, it's all about survival. Back in the day, it was way safer for our brains to assume the worst about how people perceive us. It is better to worry about a threat that doesn't exist yet than to miss the real one. So your brain is wired to find the most dramatic interpretation first. But here's the catch. It's stuck in the wrong era. It treats a friend's slightly off message like it's a life or death situation with a tribe. You can go from, oh, they misread one text, to, I'm unlovable and would end up alone in a second. So now, if your brain only serves you up the worst version, the key is to make it consider a better one. And this is the second tool. Give yourself a most generous read. Once you've caught yourself spiraling, pause and ask yourself, what's the kindest reason they might have said that? Then come up with 2 or 3 explanations, or maybe just one, I think one is enough, that are not about you being at fault. Even if you don't totally believe them yet, that's perfectly fine. Let me break it down for you. Imagine you're at a family dinner after a long, exhausting day, and you're just zoning out, just kind of there. And then your mom looks over and say, oh, you clearly don't want to be here. And suddenly the worst thought hits you. She thinks I'm ungrateful. She thinks I have an attitude problem. She's disappointed in me. And all you want to do at the moment is to snap back, to give her all the reason why her comment is wrong, how you still showed up even though you're exhausted, how she is the ungrateful one here. But then you catch yourself. You pause and try for a kinder perspective. What's the most generous reason behind her words? And then you start to imagine it. Maybe she misses you and this message just came out wrong. Maybe she's worried you look burnt out. Maybe she just wants to connect tonight but doesn't know how to express it. None of that is an attack. And just like that, the tension eases because you're no longer on the defensive, ready to fight against her because of the worst take your brain just served you before. And this is why this tool works. Your brain treats its worst story like it's the only option. So by forcing a second, kinder thought into the mix, the awful one starts to lose its power. It shifts from being the only truth to just one guess out of several. And here's the kicker. Deep down, you know that kinder interpretation is just as likely to be true as the harsh one. Your brain skips it because it's way too busy getting ready for the worst. You don't need to fully believe the generous version yet. You just have to give the worst one some competition. And I wish I knew this tool way earlier. Could have saved me from a lot of unnecessary argument. But I remember there was a tough time when I was at a low point in a previous career. I was overwhelmed and, as usual, I went silent and withdraw into my own head. And to my wife, my silence probably came off as cold and uncaring. And so one night she said, you don't care about us as you used to. And bam, the worst thought flooded into my head. She thinks I'm cold, that I've given up, that I'm the bad guy here. And anger shot up like crazy because it felt so unfair. What does she mean that I don't care? Does everything I've done for our marriage up until this point counts for nothing? She knows fully well that I'm struggling with my career at this point, so how dare she? But rather than jump straight into another argument, this time I held back my responses. I paused for a second and it wasn't easy, but then I asked myself to think of a kinder angle. I asked myself, what is the most understanding reason she said that? And luckily for me, it clicked pretty fast. The reason I gave myself was, she wasn't attacking me. She was just scared. The phrase, "you don't care anymore," was probably just her brain's worst case scenario. Totally the same thing mine was doing. She was hurting and reaching out the only way she knew how. And once I realized that, she stopped feeling like my enemy. And the conversation continued without ending in a fight like before. We were both able to empathize with each other. I could empathize with her need for connection, and she could empathize with me needing some emotional support. So now you have the tool to split between what was actually said and what you thought it meant. And now you also have the ability to switch out the worst version of the story for a kinder one. But here's the thing. Both tools are still in your head. Even when you can identify what you thought the other person meant and come up with a kinder story, it is still just that, a story, not a fact. It is a guess about what someone else is thinking. And the only way to actually know what's going on is to take that last step. The one that doesn't just cool you down, but also clears up the misunderstanding. Which leads us to point 3. Stop guessing and get curious. So the first two tools that we talked about earlier, the split and the kinder read, that's you just managing a guess, a hypothesis in your head. But here's the thing about a guess. It is still guessing. Misunderstanding starts from a guess about what someone else is thinking. You decided what they think of you, and then you got mad at your own assumption without even checking if it was right. You're not really angry at them. You're frustrated by your own guess about them. So why don't we just ask another person what they really meant? Well, the reason is because feeling certain feels safer. For you, it is actually easier to think they have a bad opinion on you rather than to admit that you really don't know what's going on. But that certainty is what keeps the fire burning. As long as you're convinced you know exactly what they meant, you will just defend yourself. You're in fight mode, and every action of yours will be simply driven by your own emotion. But what are you actually defending? You see, there's actually something beneath all of this. It is the thing that your anger has been trying to protect. What you really want, more than winning an argument, is to be understood for who you really are. But no matter how much you explain yourself, no matter how many examples you can pull out to prove them wrong, or throw an insult back at somebody because you think that they have insulted you, you know as well as I do that these kind of communication style doesn't really go anywhere. And the only way to clear things up is to address the misunderstanding directly. So instead of getting all defensive, get curious, out loud, and here is your third tool. Ask. Simply ask. Before you jump into defense, ask a real question like, what did you really mean by that? Or, when you say I don't care, what do you actually see? Be genuine and look for a real answer. No traps or sarcasm, just honest curiosity. And there are two reasons why simply asking actually works. First, just asking the question pulls you out of fight mode because you can't be both furious and curious at the same time. After all, anger only arises when you already have a strong opinion, while curiosity exists before forming a judgment. And second, this method gives the other person a chance to clear up the misunderstanding. And often, they'll respond with something like, "Oh no, that's not what I meant at all." That's probably the response you've been waiting for all along. And the only way to get it is simply by asking, not swinging back. And here's how this ties everything together. The curiosity is the doorway that lets the other two tools come into play. I mean, it is really tough to split the words from your own story when you're dead set on your beliefs. And it is also very hard to build a generous read when you're convinced that the worst is the truth. But the moment you ask yourself, do I actually know what they meant, or did I just decide? That certainty starts to crack and everything else opens up. So this doesn't have to be the last tool to use. It can be the first one, and that's what I personally prefer. The quickest thing you can do is to get curious before you raise your voice. This could make the previous two tools that we talked about, the split and the generous read, much easier to apply it afterwards. Let's look at a scenario where this could actually play out in real life. Let's say you post something on Instagram that really matters to you, and then a couple of hours later you saw someone commenting on that post, and the comment is totally missing the point. It's like they read it as the complete opposite of what you're trying to say. And when you saw that comment, your heart starts racing and your thumbs are itching to fire back with a reply that'll mess up your whole day. But this time, you hit pause and break it down. What did they actually say versus what am I thinking it means? Then you give it a more generous spin. Oh, maybe they skimmed it. Maybe that person had a completely different experience. Maybe that person just had an argument with somebody and brought that vibe here. Then comes the real move. Instead of snapping back, you get curious and replied on that comment. Genuinely asking, what made you read it that way? And then one of two things could happen. They either explain and you realize something you said tripped them up, or they could just go silent because there weren't much thought behind the original comment. Either way, you didn't waste your whole afternoon and you didn't turn into someone you dislike in your own comment. See, that's the thing about letting your emotion take over your action, because a lot of times we end up regretting them, and I'm speaking from personal experience. I remember a while back, I shared some good news with a close friend, and it was something that I was really stoked about. But then he just goes, "Must be nice." And that was it, just 3 simple words. At that time, my brain went into overdrive. All of these judgments popped up in my head. Oh yeah, he's just jealous. He's downplaying my achievement. He's not really happy for me. What kind of friend says that? And so I went cold on him. I only answered with short replies ever since and just kept my distance, and I let it eat at me for weeks and getting more mad at my friend as each day passed. And honestly, checking in on him was the last thing I wanted to do because I was convinced I knew exactly what he meant, but the negative emotions in my head wouldn't stop bothering me. And one day something dawned on me. I asked myself, have I simply just decided what he meant rather than confirming it first? So one day, finally, awkwardly, I asked him, when you said "must be nice," what did you really mean? And he goes, "Oh dude, man, sorry about that. I actually thought it was awesome. I was just really swamped with my own stuff and I think that came out kind of flat. I'm really, really happy for you. Really." At that moment, I felt about 2 inches tall. I had spent weeks silently fuming at my buddy who was proud of me, all over just 3 simple words. I mean, that simple question didn't just save our friendship. It pulled me out of weeks of unnecessary drama. That's the whole point. So let's do a recap. When someone leaves a comment that feels like a judgment of your character and gets you feeling angry in a heartbeat, instead of reacting right away, take a moment to pause and realize you might not have fully grasped what they meant. That little moment of curiosity is key. From here, ask yourself, what did they actually say? And what do I think he meant? The split technique helps you see that what you heard isn't exactly what was said. It is your brain's own interpretation, a story you made up. And once you see that, you might realize it's probably the worst case scenario your mind cooked up. And so from here, try swapping it out for a kinder guess. Like, maybe they were just having a rough day. Or maybe the tone was off, but they didn't mean it that way. This shift can help you step back from your anger and stay calm. After that, just ask what they really meant to get a clear answer. That genuine curiosity opens things up, and being able to tell the difference between their own words and your interpretation makes it easier to understand each other. If you take away anything from this episode, let it be this one. Before you react, get curious. Ask yourself one simple question. Do I really know what they meant, or did I just assume? That tiny hint of doubt is where it all starts. You don't need to get everything else perfect. You just have to get curious before you react. And here's the thing. The first few times you try this, it might be a little awkward. You might catch the story 3 sentences too late, after you've already snapped. I mean, it took me weeks just to ask that question. And even then, it came out pretty clumsy. But know this, that is not a failure. That is just part of the process. Every time you notice you spent the whole afternoon deciding what those few words actually meant, you'll get a little better at catching it next time. That noticing, that's where the progress happens. Progress to find your inner peace. Know this, it's not about being fragile. It's that deep down, under all that anger, there's a quiet and human part of you that just wants to be seen for who you really are. That frustration, it was never really about the anger. It was you protecting that part of yourself that wants, more than anything, to be understood. And you don't protect that part by being defensive. You protect it by being curious enough to let the truth come through. You don't need to win the moment. Just stop guessing what's going through someone else's head and simply ask. It starts with one curious question instead of a sharp comment. If you found this episode helpful, Send this to that one friend you know that always over-explains themselves. I think you know exactly who I'm talking about. And if you've given all 3 tools a try, the next time someone screws up with you, or if there's a topic that you want me to dig into next, you can find me on Instagram at selffulpodcast or leave it in the comments in whatever platform that you're listening to this podcast on. Remember to get curious before you get loud. The real you deserves one honest question and one honest answer, just like everyone else. And remember, I'm always here for you. Take care.